something I mentioned during the review last night that I wanted to look at. So this morning I did. And that is teams that start really, really slow. Teams that start with records that are just awful. As of November 2nd, so as of last night, at the end of the action, these teams are all below 300 in their save percentage this season. Detroit in the Atlantic. Also in the Atlantic, you've got Ottawa. Detroit's won 26.7% of their games. Ottawa's won 29.2%. In the Central, Chicago's won 29.2%. And Minnesota's won 28.6%. The Pacific, San Jose's won 26.7%. So I thought, you know what? Let's take a look. Let's go to Hockey Reference, look at the standings on that date, take out the old calculator, and figure out who was below 300. So 300 I wanted to make the standard because I could look at below 500 altogether, but below 300, that's kind of a miserable record. You look at San Jose, Minnesota, Chicago, Ottawa, and Detroit, and they're all off to really miserable starts. And just looking at, they're the bottom 5 teams in my power rankings, and story checks out. 2018, so last season we only had 2. So this season we have 5. Last season we had 2. I was right. There seems to be more of them this year. Florida started with a 27.3% winning percentage to last night's date. I wanted to make sure it was the same date I was going by. They ended up 36, 32, and 14. Respectable record, but they missed the playoffs. They drafted 13th overall. They got Spencer Knight, goaltender for the future. The Pacific Division had LA at a 25% winning percentage. And they finished 31, 42, and 9. They drafted 5th overall, and they got Turcotte. So I wanted to look at how these teams finished, and what did they do in the draft that year? Did they get something good? 2017, there were two that started off this badly. Edmonton winning 27.3% of their games. They ended up 36, 40, and 8 at the end of the season. They drafted 10th overall. They got Evan Bouchard. And, of course, Arizona, who was off to that historically bad start. They were 0.71 in their save percentage. 29, 41, and 12. Yeah, they won 7% of their games. And Barrett Hayden at number 5 was their reward. So, where people talk about tanking, you'll get the number 1 draft pick. Not necessarily. Especially if you see it early like this. It doesn't necessarily indicate where they're going to draft. Metro. Carolina started out in 2016 with a 22.2% winning percentage at this point in the year. They were the only team. So that was 1. There were 2 in 2017 and 2 in 2018. They ended up 36, 31, and 15. They drafted 12th overall, and they got Netchus. And I remember, by the end of the 2016-2017 season, yeah, they were in the race, but they had started out so slowly that weighed them down. So even if you find a team out of these 5, like San Jose, where you can say, hey, they can turn it around, yes, but you have to win so many, and you have to have a record that's so good from there. It just, the odds of it become longer and longer the longer this losing happens. 2015, there were 5. And this was teams that were more miserable than what we're seeing right now. Toronto started off with a 182 winning percentage. I keep wanting to say save percentage. Winning percentage. 29, 42, and 11. They drafted 1st overall. They got Austin Matthews. And Leaf fans will tell you that season was worth it, as painful as it was. Columbus, 16.7% of their games they were winning. They finished 34, 42, and 8. They drafted 3rd overall. They drafted Pierre-Luc Dubois. He's a pretty good center for them right now. In the Central, Colorado started off with a 27.3 winning percentage. They ended up 39, 39, and 4. So they recovered as well. But they were behind the 8 ball at this time of the year in 2015. Tyson Jost was drafted 10th overall by them. In the Pacific, at a 25% winning percentage, or 250, if you're looking at the decimal number here. The Calgary Flames, who finished 35, 40, and 7, they drafted 6th overall, and they got Matthew Tkachuk. Now, of course, that Tkachuk draft pick will be talked about in Vancouver for a very long time, because Vancouver drafted 5th and drafted Yule Levy. However, moving along, with a 182, or an 18.2% of their games they were winning rate, Anaheim looked dead in the water. But They finished 46, 25, and 11. They made the playoffs. So for these 5 teams, one of them might very well do it. And with an 18.2%, like a 182 altogether, but they won 18.2% of their games. They had a really nice turnaround. Amazing turnaround for Anaheim. Needed some winning streaks in there, as I remember. Drafted 24th, they got Max Jones. And so again, you can probably point to San Jose. Of the 5 teams this year that have got off to this slow start, you can point to San Jose and say these guys should make the playoffs. And I can't really make an argument that they shouldn't. There are issues I have with their goaltending. There are issues I have with their overall forward depth. But I can't make the argument that this team shouldn't be able to find a way to turn around if anybody out of these 5 can. And of course, Chicago, it's there potentially. In theory, when you've still got Kane and Taves and Keith and Crawford, and you've still got a nucleus of a team that won a bunch of games before. But we'll see. 2014 in the Atlantic. It was a miserable start for Buffalo on purpose. They were at 231, so below 300. And 23, 51, and 8 was their final record. They drafted number 2 that year. They got Jack Eichel. And drafting number 1 was Edmonton, who didn't get off to that miserable start. Eventually, they got there. And, of course, they drafted McDavid. In the Metro, Carolina gets off to a 200 start. So, they were playing 200 hockey, not 500, 200. They finished 30, 41, and 11. They drafted 5th overall, and they got Noah Hannafin. So, they did play better after that. And, like here, you know, where that comeback happens, and they still didn't make the playoffs. The Colorado Avalanche, I'll get there. They started off with a 231 winning percentage. They finished 39, 31, and 12. They drafted 10th overall. They got Rantanen. So, with drafting Rantanen here and drafting Jost, they draft 10th. Both times they start with miserable winning percentages. And, of course, Rantanen's been pretty good for them. 2013, 2014, there were 4. So 5 is still the most we've seen since the lockout shortened season of 2012-2013. That's always where I cut these things off. 2015, we saw 5 as well. As I said, Toronto, that was on purpose. There was nothing on purpose about Columbus's start. And, of course, Anaheim turned theirs around. Colorado kind of turned theirs around. Ended up 500 at the end of the year. And for Calgary, it was just another one of those years where they were searching for an identity. Now, in 2013, the Atlantic Division had 2 teams. You had Florida that started with a 214 winning percentage. They finished 29, 45, and 8. They drafted number 1 overall, and they got Aaron Ekblad. Number 2 overall went to the Buffalo Sabres, who started with a 125 winning percentage. They finished 21, 51, and 10. They drafted number 2, Sam Reinhart, but they did not win the draft lottery. That went to the Atlantic. Foe of theirs, Florida. So, yeah, I don't think Buffalo's upset with Sam Reinhart. Reinhart's turned out to be a pretty good forward. In the Metro, at a 231 winning percentage, the New Jersey Devils ended up finishing the season 35, 29, and 18. They had to draft 30th overall that year because of the Kovalchuk penalty. So, because of Kovalchuk's contract and Kovalchuk left, New Jersey was penalized those draft picks in the beginning, and they went, that's kind of mean. So they gave them the number 30 overall draft pick. And they drafted John Quenneville. And you look at some of the players who were drafted, where they would have drafted, I believe, is 11th overall, which is where Kevin Fiala was drafted. There's a good chance New Jersey would have drafted a player that would still be there right now. So, yeah, the Kovalchuk penalty really did hurt them. Even though they got their first-round draft pick technically back. It wasn't really theirs, though. It was number 30 overall. In the Pacific, Edmonton started with a 200 winning percentage. They ended up finishing 29, 44, and 9. They drafted number 3 overall, and that's Leon Draisaitl. So what's interesting here is draft picks 1, 2, and 3 are all found in 3 of the top 4 teams that finished or started at the bottom. They finished near the bottom or at the bottom. This is your lottery. Teams 1 and 3 are found here. So odds are teams 1 and 3 are found here. Maybe teams 1 and 2 are found here. Maybe 2 and 4, 2 and 3. Odds are very good that somebody's going to get drafted early by one of these teams. You look at 2014, the number 2 and number 5 picks are in this one. 2016, the only team that started slow was Carolina. They finished with the number 12 draft pick. 2017, that's your number 5. 2018, there's your number 5. So almost guarantee somebody in the top 5 is getting drafted by these teams. More than likely 1, 3, 4, somewhere in that region. And that it is very difficult to make that comeback. Because once you're behind this far into the season, the amount of energy needed to be expended and the amount of teams you need to pass. The amount of teams you need to pass becomes daunting by around mid-November. But already at this stage, you can see of 17 teams on this board, one of them made the playoffs from every season going back to the 2013-2014 season. And that was Anaheim. And Anaheim had no business having a 182 winning percentage at this point. I would argue that San Jose wouldn't have any, but they've been miserable. It's just been awful. So, yeah, we'll see what ends up happening. So which one of the 5 teams off to that slow start with a winning percentage of less than 300, which one ends up turning things around? Or do any of them turn it around? Do you look at all 5 and say, yeah, no, none of them are making the playoffs? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Again, I thought this would be fun to look at today after I was thinking about it last night. And sure enough, it is. It is interesting to see that while we all make the argument, well, it's early and everybody can turn around and kumbaya, the reality is the odds of these teams turning it around, it's against them. Because even if you play 500 hockey from here, you're not making the playoffs. So let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.